welcome to another video. So today I am here with my July 2020 reading wrap-up. It was interesting. I think that I did not read quite as much as I expected to read during July, but at the same time I still read quite a bit, and so I'm overall very happy with my progress. This is also a wrap-up that will relate to you my progress in the F-a-thon readathon that also happened in the month of July. I was almost successful, so we'll get into it. First, a couple of notes for my reading planner. This is how my bingo board ended up shaping up. As you can see, the goal wasn't to black out the board, it was to make the letter F. And I don't know if there's any way I can turn this where I really did that. I picked some weird prompts that I ended up focusing on where I might have been able to do a different prompt, but I didn't focus on that. I think this square right here is the one that I really should have focused on completing, and that would have given me the letter F that I needed, but instead I did a few random other prompts and didn't quite get the letter F, but I still read a lot. So let's get into that. This is my books read in July page. So I decided for this notebook to actually letter the titles of the books and then put the star rating at the bottom. In my old peanut butter taco planner, there was like a bookshelf where you could write the names on the spines and then a separate section for books acquired. And then at the very back, there was a space for mini book reviews, but I kind of didn't like doing those very much because all throughout the weeks, I'm writing about the books. Like, I'm writing what I think about the books as I'm reading them, and so I don't need to have a separate review personally. This is my whole July reading page, and this is what I'll be referencing as you go through this video. Also note that these books are books read in July, but they're also books finished in July. So one of these is a carryover from June, where I read like a quarter of the book maybe before the month of July started, and then finished it in the month of July and counted it as part of my July wrap-up because I didn't finish it in June, even if I started it there. It's very rare that I start and finish all my books within the calendar month. So the first book on this list is Bone Criers Moon by Catherine Purdy. I did read this as a physical book right here. This is the Fairy Loot edition with the green sprayed edges. I believe this is the March book of the month for Fairy Loot. And I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. So Bone Criers Moon follows the story of a bone crier named I don't know how to pronounce her name, Elise, I think. And the bone criers are this group of women that ferry spirits of the dead across a bridge to the afterlife. And if they aren't ferried, they kind of stay in the mortal realm, they fester, they get evil, they start being able to interact with people and things, and they cause havoc. So it's very important that they get ferried. And Sabine is in training to become a full bone crier. Not Sabine. Sabine is the other character that we follow, Elise's best friend. Both of them are in training to be a bone crier. And part of that process is once you have finished your training, you have to kill the man you're destined to love. So there's this ritual that they complete, and it draws their soulmate essentially to where they are, and they have a couple of options. They can kill him on the spot and be done with it, or they can be with him up to a year if they want to have children. That's basically what it's for, to continue the line of bone criers. But after that year, they have to kill him. And so that's the premise of the book. Elise is getting ready to do that, and we follow the point of view of Elise, Sabine, her best friend, and then a third character named Bastian, who is looking to get revenge on the bone criers because one killed his father like 10 years before the book takes place. He's laying his trap for the bone criers, and he's just hoping that they're gonna fall into it. So we follow all 3 plot lines. I really liked the book. I didn't think it was like super amazing, but I thought that the ending was really good. It left me wanting to know what was going to happen next. The relationships in this are interesting. It is technically, I think, a hate to love romance, which I don't always like because it feels like the characters will kind of change sides a little too easily without enough development. And that's kind of what happened here. I didn't really like the way the characters went from hating each other to liking each other. I wasn't really convinced that they spent enough significant time together. It was kind of like they spent time together not actively trying to kill each other for long enough, and then they just liked each other. So that was the one issue I had with the book, but I do think that the way the magic kind of exists is pretty cool. It was a really unique system, and like as the book goes on, you learn more and more about it, and you're also kind of geared to not know what to expect. Like there are clearly people hiding things about how the magic works, and the main characters are taking certain things about the magic for granted that you're not sure by the end of the book if it's all true. And that kind of development and the mystery behind all of the details of the magic was really interesting. And then where the book leaves off really sets us up for a very interesting beginning to the second book. And I believe that this is a series that's meant to be a duology. So there's just one more book, and I'm quite excited to read it. So I will be continuing with that series. The next book I finished in the month of July was an ebook that I got from my library. I read a lot of ebooks this month because I got back into my Kindle. I have had a Kindle since my senior year of high school. I got it as a graduation gift, and I honestly hated it for a long time because I didn't like the texture and I preferred reading physical books. However, as I read more and more fantasy books, especially the really large ones, they're like awkward to hold. And so I found myself reaching for ebook versions of the really big books in my TBRs, and also found ways of holding the Kindle where like the textures of it didn't annoy me quite as much, and I've loved it. That coupled with the fact that my library now works with Libby, so I can get Libby books from my library that I can read on my Kindle, and it's fantastic because I don't have to buy them, I don't have to go anywhere, I can read them from home. It's great. So I read a lot of ebooks this month, the first of which was the Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. I believe that is her name. And it was so good. It was so good. It was just so much fun. Like the Kiss Quotient wasn't like, I would not describe it as a super intense, thematic, dramatic kind of book. It wasn't heavy hitting, but it was very good and it was very sweet, and I read it in a day. I started it and I finished it like within 8 hours maybe. I just didn't want to stop reading it. It was so good. It was also during a day where I had been coming off of a couple of days of like being really anxious, and so taking a day to do nothing but read a light and fun book was exactly what I needed at the time, and the Kiss Quotient was perfect. I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. I'm excited to read the like second book, which doesn't seem to be a direct sequel. I think it is just a, like, I think the author takes one of the side characters in the Kiss Quotient and makes them the main character in the next book, and that's cool with me. I'm really excited to read more of her work overall. Then the next book I finished in the month of July is A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. This book I gave 5 out of 5 stars, and it was an interesting 5 out of 5 stars. It was like, it sat at a 3 or 4 star for a while, and then at the very end I kicked it up to 5 because I was just like, you know what, I kind of love the ending of this book enough. A Song of Wraiths and Ruin follows 2 people. We have Karina, who is the crown princess, and she is she's like not really a serious princess, you know, like she's not taking any of her duties seriously. She was the second born, so she wasn't expecting to be the first in line for the throne, but when her sister dies years before the book takes place, it turns out that she's the one who's now going to be next in line for the throne, and she's not really ready for that. What kicks this off is the assassination of the queen. So Karina's mother dies, and she is seeking to bring her back because she is not ready to accept the responsibilities of a queen, and it's too much for her, and she thinks that it will be much easier just to bring someone back who knows what they're doing. To do that, she needs the heart of a king to go through with this ritual that she wants to do to bring back her mother. Then we're also following Malik, who is a refugee coming from an area where the main kingdom, and I'll put the name on of the kingdom on the screen, because not only do I not know how to pronounce it, I don't remember it in this moment. But he's coming because the region he's coming from doesn't get a lot of support from the main kingdom, and he's looking for more opportunities, better work, things like that. Events happen where his younger sister gets taken by a spirit, and she's being held hostage. The spirit needs payment for something that happens in the first couple of chapters, and he is going to take the young sister's life unless Malik does something for him. And the spirit wants Malik to kill the princess. So now we have these two characters, and one of them directly needs to kill the other. But there's also a competition, the Solstasia competition, where the different people who are chosen to represent their like factions, there are different groups that people identify with, like the sun, the moon, water, fire, things like that. And they each have a representative to enter in this tournament style game. And the prize for each tournament changes every time it's held. It's marked by the passing of a comet that only comes every 50 years, so it's a really big event. Malik works his way into that competition so that he can get close enough to Karina to kill her. That's the premise that we have at the beginning of A Song of Wraiths and Ruin, and I really liked it. It's kind of weird because it's also technically a hate to love romance, but for so much of the book, the characters aren't really interacting with each other. We are following two different perspectives, first person for Karina and Malik, and they don't even interact at all for a long time. And then when they come together, it's more of insta-love actually than hate to love. Maybe it's like enemies to lovers. I don't know what title trope you want to put onto it, but it's weird because I did not like the beginning of their relationship and how that worked itself out. It kind of started from nothing and nowhere, and then boom, they were like in love with each other. So that was not fantastic, but I really liked the development of the magic system in this book. I just thought that it was very unique, and there were a lot of different elements that I hadn't seen before, and I really liked the ending. The ending took surprising turns. Like the last 50 pages or so had me on the edge of my seat, and I'm very excited to see what's going to happen next. You get so much information about like the kingdom and the history, and the world building really is what made it for me, this book. The characters, like, not the best, but where they left off, their relationship left off at the end of this book is very interesting. So I'm excited to see where it goes, and that's why I gave it 5 stars. The next book I finished in the month of July, Season of Storms by Andrzej Sapkowski. I wanted to love this book, and yet I spent the whole time reading it just waiting for it to end. I felt like it was a book that did not add anything to the story, like nothing happened. That being said, it's also a book that people have said pays off at the end of the main pentology, so maybe I'll gain appreciation for it as we read the main series. But as a standalone prequel, it was not good. The storms didn't have anything to do with anything. Like, they were just a thematic element in the background. Every now and again, Geralt was like, oh, there's a storm. The story can be summarized as Geralt loses and searches for his Witcher swords. That's what the whole thing's about. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I didn't like it. It's also really hard to rate and judge it though, because it's not just the story. Like, nothing happened in the book. Okay, that's just the way I feel about it. At the same time, it also wasn't compellingly written, and that's not just the book. It is in translation, so it was originally written in Polish, and I don't speak Polish, so I had to read the translation, and I honestly was not a fan. Now, I don't know everything that goes into making a book from translation, but it felt very, very awkward in a lot of places. Like, they said things in ways that just did not make sense in English, as well as maybe they might have in Polish. And so the translation just didn't feel polished. It did not read as a natural English book. It read very much like it was heavily translated. There are words that don't even make sense. Like, the word choice for the translation is not good. Here's a warning in the first like 10 pages of the book. If you know there's a slur out there, its literal definition is bundle of sticks. And that is not the way it is commonly used these days. It is not a good word. Like, I'm not even gonna say it. You can look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. And it's just there. It's just written in the book as its literal definition. That's what it means. It wasn't used as a slur in the book, but it also wasn't necessary. Like, if you're translating a book and you see this word, yeah, maybe you can put it there because that's what it literally means, but contextually speaking, it's not a good word to choose. You know, like they could have put something else there. They could have said a bundle of sticks, but they didn't. They used that word. And that just didn't sit well with me. It didn't feel like the person doing the translation did a thoughtful translation. It was way more literal than I expected it to be. Or at least that's the way it read to me. It was very, very odd. And it was also, it didn't read naturally. Like some of the words chosen are ridiculous. Like I had to look up words every other page. My boyfriend had to look up words every other page, and he has one of the best vocabularies. I know my vocabulary is not very bad either. Like we know words, but some of these words were like someone just like rifled through a thesaurus, and it's weird. Other times you have two words that are synonyms of each other, but they're written in a the syntax of the sentence implies that they're opposites, or like they somehow complement each other, but it feels like they're the same word. Like this is from a different book, but a different Witcher book, because I just read it. But an example is like, this thing was irritating and bothersome. Aren't irritating and bothersome basically the same word? So the kind of subpar plotting, like nothing very exciting or interesting happened for much of the book, coupled with the fact that the translation was not easy or inviting or good to read, really made it hard for me to like Season of Storms. It wasn't my favorite. I think the parts I like best were anytime Geralt and Dandelion were together, because Dandelion is one of my favorite characters so far. So 2 out of 5 stars, Season of Storms. The next book I finished in the month of July was The Hate You Give. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. It was incredibly compelling and very hard-hitting. Like, I don't know, I teared up like 5 times. And I don't cry very much in books, but like, it was intense. So The Hate You Give follows the story of Star Carter, who witnesses, after she's going home from a party, the murder of one of her childhood friends, Khalil, by a police officer for basically no reason. And so it's very, very clear to Star that the police officer, who is white, really only shot first and like so instinctively because Khalil was black. And she's the only witness. So the police are asking her questions, and she has to deal with how they interpret her answers and whether she feels listened to by them, as well as trying to protect her own identity and her own, just to feel safe, and dealing with what she wants to do when it comes to maintaining her privacy and speaking out, and to what degree she wants to do either or can do either. And it's a very good book. Like, it's interesting because if you take it as a plot, like just the plot of the book, it didn't surprise me, right? The plot of the story is something that we have seen taking place in the real world over and over, unfortunately. It wasn't that something different happened, but it was the way the characters were written. Like, the way the characters are written really makes you want to just know everything about them and want the absolute best for them. Like, you're just reading this book and you're hoping that they're all going to be okay by the end of it. And it's every single character. Like, none of the characters felt boring or superfluous or underdeveloped. Like, they all had very vibrant personalities on these pages, and it was good. I really, really really love this book. So 5 out of 5 stars for The Hate You Give. The next book I finished in the month of July was The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan. 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this book. This is my favorite book so far. Now, we're not even halfway through the series yet, but it was so good. I loved every single perspective, and that almost has never happened. In all the other books, there's one thread or storyline that we're following that I don't really care about, and I'm just waiting until we get to return to one of the ones that I do care about. But I love them all. Like, we have, well, I can't say much without giving away spoilers, but basically it was brilliant and I loved it. And the vlog for that will be up in like the 3rd week of August. And then the last book that I finished in the month of July wasn't even on my TBR, so I just kind of picked it up, and it was The Elite by Kira Cass. This is the 2nd book in the Selection series. The Selection series and I have an interesting relationship. It is not a series I'm currently reading because I think it will be any good or because I expect to really love it. It's a book I'm reading for my 15-year-old self who started to read the series, read the first 2 books, and then never finished it. And even though 23-year-old me is kind of like, wow, these are cheesy and like nothing's happening, 15-year-old me was very into the first 2 and really wanted to know what was going to happen next. So 23-year-old me is just gonna finish the series finally. They're quick, easy reads to me, and it doesn't take that much effort. They're like mildly entertaining. 3 out of 5 stars to The Elite. It wasn't fantastic, but you know, I read it in a couple of days. I didn't have any problems reading it. Like, there weren't parts that dragged. It just also didn't change my life. Basically, it takes place shortly after the end of the first book, and we just continue with the selection. So now there are 6 girls left, and some interesting plot points are the way that the world kind of gets developed. I don't think it's necessarily developed well, but it's developed more, which I appreciated. I think that the biggest thing that happened in this book for me was the back and forth on the love triangle. There's a love triangle in the selection, and the main character goes back and forth between the 2 way too much and way too quickly. 1 second she's like, oh, I'm all with this one, and then the next second she's like, he did something mildly questionable, and instead of talking to him rationally, I'm just gonna remember that I have this other option over here, and you know what, he's better. And then once eventually this communication inevitably happens, she's like, oh, you know what, you're not as good, he's as good. And like, just this back and forth over the dumbest things. I did appreciate that one of the main characters, Maxon, did call her out on it. The main character's name's America. He finally called her out on the fact that she just did not trust him at all. She would say she's into him, and then anything that she thought might at all be problematic that he did before talking to him or without giving him a chance to really explain everything, she'd shut down and push him away and be like, this is impossible, you're not who I thought you were, blah 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 blah. It was the worst. I didn't like that at all. But I'm gonna finish the series because I owe it to my 15-year-old self. And that is all of the books that I read in the month of July. So that brings us to a total of 7 books, an average star rating of 4.1, which is pretty good. I read 2 physical books this month, and I read 5 ebooks because I am loving my Kindle. And that's the month of July. So let me know down in the comments what you read in the month of July. What was your favorite? Any new favorites? Did you read anything that was particularly disappointing? That would be interesting. Let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!